それら全てが私の一部であり、私という意識そのものを生み出し、そして同時に私をある限界に制約し続ける。
それが沈む体を抱えて海に潜る理由か。暗い海の底で一体何が見えるってんだ。
Elizabeth Birmingham writes in her essay, "These series, though quite different in many ways, share two core features. First, young female characters are surgically or genetically manipulated to make them extremely dangerous. Second, and perhaps most central, is the stance of the program towards these girls, that they are to be disciplined, made less dangerous, and more controllable, usually through gender discipline and heterosexual love. And to understand why this is the case, why your cute high school waifus would be likened to semi-automatic rifles, let's dive into the history regarding this. Our story begins in the small town of Japan, in the Meiji era. Japanese girls moved quickly from childhood to married motherhood, because married motherhood was the state in which their value to society was best realized. The fate of Japan were in the hands of women, who would produce educated children. Women were meaningful insofar as they enhanced the wealth and the strength of the empire. However, modernization in women's formal education led to the lengthening of the time between childhood and marriage, which meant that now we had something called adolescents, teenagers. Wait, I'll do you one better. Young female teenagers, shoujo. When the Japanese economy skyrocketed in the 60s, it was accompanied by a hell of a lot of consumption. And man, what happens when the wants of a woman never end? Thus, in this way, shoujo began to signify a state of passivity, consumerism, commodification, narcissism, consumption without production, moral and ethical emptiness. This is all jolly good when the economy is great. But when shit hit the fan in the 90s and the economy plummeted, people were now real concerned regarding young Japanese women who would not even at a time when men were out of work just grow the hell up, get married and fulfill their social roles. The childish kawaii craze and Lolita style were read as evidence of this unwillingness, a new species capable of polluting an entire culture with their insatiable desires. See, the situation was, and I believe still is, rather serious. Japan has always been a family nation, which means the business world, the government, and the nuclear family unit where mothers educated the next generation of workers and mothers, all of this had always been connected. Family, school, and work. In the 90s, apart from rupturing of the economy, when the Hanshin earthquake hit and there wasn't a proper response, it destroyed the confidence people had towards the government. This was when the Aum Shinrikyo, a Japanese doomsday cult, killed 13 people, and thus alienating Japanese people to themselves. The dawning understanding that the nation had no mechanism for responding effectively, or even understanding the hopelessness of the young cult members who attempted to murder thousands of their fellow Japanese. All of this was the newfound burden upon society, and thus burden upon women. The new century of 2000s was even more vindictive of women, focusing on the out-of-line girl, criticizing them for reading BDSM, bleaching their hair, tanning their face like a witch. Compensated dating created a media shitstorm that lasted for more than 5 years. This was not just about vulgar sexuality, but that middle-class girls were selling themselves to buy things, usually Western designer goods, things that their austere hard-working mothers had done without. Moral responsibility seemed to lie with these little sluts, and not with their adult boyfriends or customers. The public concern was rarely for the girls' safety, but more often for their adult partners, or more interestingly, for the nation itself. Women had been considered the womb of the nation's imperial body. If appropriate motherhood holds the nation together, then surely a nation without appropriate mothers was doomed. And so it's not hard to see why, in relation to this social problem, anime began to portray fictionalized young girls as dangerous, not quite human beings, genetically altered and different in substance from their parents. Something is wrong with the girls, and they have to be resocialized. The structure of Violet Evergarden is similar in this sense. From the very beginning, the audience and other characters take for granted that something is most definitely wrong with Violet. We find her first in a hospital. Of course, somehow magically, no character literally talks about her abnormality. And that's part of the trick, a genius yet problematic trick of putting the treatment before the diagnosis. I'll talk about this later. Anyhow, what's this wrongness in Violet that I'm talking about? It's alexithymia. So, what's alexithymia? It's an emotional self-regulation disorder measured on a scale, characterized by difficulty in identifying and describing feelings, and externally oriented thinking. This then leads to less empathy, constricted imagination, a paucity in facial expression, operative mode of thinking. which basically means being very utilitarian while focusing on external events in excessive detail, without any reference to inner experiences. Make no mistake, Violet has emotions, but because of alexithymia, she is unable to be conscious of them, and thus identify and differentiate between them. All that happens inside her are the somatic movements, the physical aching of the heart, the convulsion of the muscles, the headaches that accompany emotions. That's why she can cry and yet not understand sadness before any development has taken place. So yeah, Violet is alexithymic, or to be more broad, alexithymia is the rule of the world of Violet Evergarden. This is the interpretive lens, the diagnosis of alexithymia with which the writer and KyoAni are beginning their show. The question is though, is this a viable approach to the social problem of dangerous women, by presupposing all that is dangerous in women as a disease? Darker Than Black is in staunch opposition to this presupposition. The meta-commentary in Darker Than Black, confronts the writer who's trying to capture Lynn, our dangerous girl in question, but in vain, and turns out that the writer is in no position to understand and dictate Lynn. He's proven to be inconsequential in attempting to capture, or in other words, understand or dictatively write about Lynn. All he can do is observe the soul of the dangerous girl. That's what the writer can do. This makes the writer of Violet Evergarden questionable. What was she trying to achieve here? What was KyoAni attempting to capture here? There's also the new guiding figure, Lynn's adoptive father in Darker Than Black, whose well-meaning entreaties to save Lynn are portrayed as self-indulgent and narcissistic.
どうして帰らないなんて言うんだい、キルシー。嬉しくないのかい？自分の国に帰るんだよ。
帰らない。
なぜ？
知らない。
キルシー、どう言っていいか。君は昔の君と違っている。ある時期を境にして君のようになった人たちが増えたのは聞いている。心を病んだ。そう、病気なんだよ。だから僕の言うことを聞いて、僕と一緒に。
帰らない。
キルシー。
帰らん。
演奏旅行で海外を回るたびに君を探していたんだ。ずっと。
どうして？
どうしてって。
And by the end, the show has good reason to scoff at the diagnosis of alexithymia.
ドールは引き渡せ。リセットする。
いや、やっと使い勝手が馴染んできたところだ。
まあいいが。毎度情に流されるなよ。
情だと？バカめ。
Because Lynn was misunderstood from the very beginning, it berates the guiding figure for assuming the girl to be ill or ignorant, but at the same time, it doesn't deny Lynn's share of blame. But let us set aside Darker Than Black's critique of Violet Evergarden's foundations for a moment, and explore what follows from this foundation nevertheless. Learning emotions takes first priority in the show. In psychological terms, learning emotional self-regulation. The development of emotional self-regulation is intimately related to the infant and the young child's relationship with the parents. The sharing and mirroring of positive emotions between the two, and everything related to that, are of much importance here. Thus, the role of early relationships takes center stage in the show, and there's more weight to it, as the show heavily portrays conflicting familial connections, especially maternal, at every turn of the story. Mothers are dead and dying, there's a distance between them. There's one who yearns for his daughter. Men and women have to take up the role of foster fathers and mothers. Someone is about to lose their lover. Someone has lost their son. The disrupted family structure is mended by opening up to an adaptive family structure, that even after you have lost your primary caretaker, you can still find new ones. It encourages an attitude of going out in the world and learning about feelings. The loss of linear affect regulation development in early childhood can be compensated for in a fragmented manner with the help of friends later on to build a new family. Secondly, the two central themes of war and alexithymia inform each other. Violet is a byproduct of a pathological current caused by war. It is well documented that war causes alexithymia. But to be more specific, what is war within the context of the social problem of alexithymia? Well, for starters, war is what tragically separates the guiding figure. It legitimizes the usage of a young girl as a tool by the government. In war, both individuals and the community becomes somatized, operative. Situations are construed in binaries of contentment or distress, kill or be killed, all of which is at the heart of alexithymia. War is that which engenders and sustains alexithymia. Alexithymia is the war that Japan faces. Or to put it differently, alexithymia is the trauma of World War II. World War II and the decades surrounding it must have surely been the symbolic moment of historical break between the Meiji era of womanhood and the postmodern women of now. Thus, the show is also a window for post-World War II sensibilities in regards to women, with far-right political groups in the play near the end, who of course are ultranationalists. Of course they want war, and as I said, war means alexithymia, and alexithymia means people being turned into expendable tools. The aftermath of alexithymia and the need to stop its resurgence is of much importance to the show. Violet's rehabilitation is parallel with the reconstruction of society. Reconstruction of some aspect of Japanese society and womanhood, her requires the process of identifying and describing one's feelings and transporting them to their destination. Alexithymia destroyed bridges between nations and people. The fantastic institution of auto-memory dolls' intention is to save these bridges, to create healthy emotional bondings. Now to finally dive into resocialization, here Violet plays an important role. She embodies the mythic ideal of Yamato Nadeshiko, a pitch-perfect representation of a beautiful woman, the kind of elegant, flower-like beauty that has become naturalized and idealized in Japanese society. A beauty prized in a society that places significance on nature, the passing of seasons, the grace of flora that enriches the Japanese environment. With this comes loyalty and submissiveness towards family and nation. Of course, the sensible kind, as Violet is shown to be able to stand up for herself by the end. But before we reach that climax, that moment of feminist empowerment, that moment of historical and national integration, we have the tentative question of the Japanese career woman, Iris, the more exuberant and tomboyish of them all. The career woman's refusal to be married, her jealousy towards the Yamato Nadeshiko, partly because of seeing her traditional parents get taken in by Violet's flower-like ethereal traditional beauty. Her fragile pride, her insecurity regarding her competence in the field, presented as a potential cause for a fall, whose precarious liberalism, poisoned with pride, must be saved by the humble hands of the Yamato Nadeshiko. The career woman's refusal to be married is relegated to her trauma of having had troubles with romantic relationships in the past, troubles which must be resolved, and after the troubles and anxieties are resolved, that's exactly where the show takes a turning point. The episode doesn't end with Iris getting married when it absolutely could have. Instead, it ends with Iris on her way back to being an auto-memory doll, with several anxieties and troubles resolved, happier than before. See, Violet isn't able to save Iris. Iris has to save herself. Episode 5 explores the conflicts of a salaryman, or to be more generous, the conflicts between going forward, staying put, and the tenuous love in between, and that tension shaping the way we look at love and gender. At first, due to having been abandoned by his mother for love, and especially due to his competent nature, he looks down on women. But when the career woman and the salaryman work together, without any pretensions towards each other, they're able to be highly productive, changing his perspective towards women and love, having confronted someone equal to himself. Episodes 7 and 10 are recollective of the Meiji feminine ideal of good wife, wise mother, respectively. Violet, through displacement, is able to serve the role of a wife for the writer, at the same time realizing the relationship between a father and a daughter. Episode 10 is about being a mother, and how the little girl is saved from an attention-related traumatic memory, and thus is able to go on becoming a mother herself. It's about how a mother sometimes has to give up on immediately attending to her daughter in the present, all for the sake of attending to her future, her development, all of her life. The episode appeals to those who are afraid of becoming parents, because they feel like they'll repeat an attention-related trauma they endured as children from their own parents. See, when feminist tension was in the rise, demanding political autonomy in the early decades of the 20th century in Japan, a motto was propagated by the government to appease the tension, giving a newfound purpose to women, a purpose directly connected to the highest ideal, that of the preservation of Japan. It was the image of the good wife, wise mother, assigning women a public, albeit a domestic role that meant women were now to be educated, however narrowly. Some women saw this as a sign of modern progress. Other more radical women saw it as yet another way by which the government was limiting women's activities in the name of national well-being. This is the kind of conflict that permeates throughout contemporary Japan, and under whose shadow Violet Evergarden is written. On one hand, we have women being compared to flowers, something which can depersonalize, objectify, and ultimately naturalize women. But then they are not just flowers, they are names, identities, and the show demonstrates what true freedom without identities and roles, without someone to take orders from, feels like, and persuades us about why exactly names, pieces of clothing, even names born from flowers are important. They're not just beautiful, they can be meaningful. The mechanical arms serving to symbolize both loss and strength, at once reminding us of both the burden of women, punishing them for being servient, an embodiment of trauma from the past, the trauma induced because of her subservience towards the Major, which she repeats once again in the end by serving, or rather saving her friends and the future of nations, a kind of higher service than the primitive former one where she only cared about the Major and none of the other lives. Ultimately, what is important throughout all of this is that Violet moves on. Her socialization is not an attempt to confine her, but rather to free her from herself.